listened to Stefan Urbat talking about the physics of climate change, and then we had two very interesting and also really terrifying speeches talking about the impact of climate change in Afghanistan and Senegal, and that made very clear that the climate change is already happening now and it is already causing disruption and deaths. We are now moving on to the second session of our teaching. And this session is dedicated in particular to animals and to the meat industry, to how we produce the food. So we have the pleasure of having here people, citizens from the Climate Safe movement, who will give a talk on the impact of the food industry on the climate. And then we'll hear from Dr. Stephanie Rauch. About the relationship between, again, the impact of the climate change on the animals and on livestock. So I'll leave the floor to Max. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So
I take the microphone.
Yep. Hello. So yeah, it's working. So yeah, my name is Max. So first of all, I would like to thank you all for having us.
I'm Tim from Climate Safe Germany, and we try to lead you through this presentation this morning.
Yeah, thank you. So we will be talking about the contribution of animal agriculture to climate change and the loss of biodiversity. Unfortunately, it's something that's not being talked about much in the population in general, and specifically in the climate movement, environmental movement, and the scientific community. So yeah, it's such an important factor, actually. Anything you want to add as an introduction?
I would say animal agriculture is the most important factor for the degradation of our ecosystem. And yeah, maybe we show the next slide to start.
Yeah. All right. So here we see a closed. Well, first of all, we also have to thank our dear friend Martin Müller from Munich, which we from whom we got all these amazing slides. So we are basically only presenting his findings and all the data and facts he gathered. So thanks for that. His homepage is called Landwirtschaft jetzt, which means agriculture now. That's exactly what we need. Here we see a closed biogeochemical nutrient cycle, like we have in a functioning ecosystem that's not being disturbed. So we have the producers, primary plants, and the consumers, animals, non-human animals, human animals, and then the destruents, soil organisms, bacteria, fungi, and they in turn nourish the plants. So this is a what a closed loop looks like, where nothing is, everything is in flow and nothing is being lost.
And in nature, this is the optimal cycle, as animals stay in their place. They eat the plants that grow where they live, and they die where they have eaten, and so the nutrients stay in this cycle, and nothing is added and nothing is distracted. Taken out.
All right, and then we will be looking at trophic levels, or how energy is being converted between trophic levels. So trophic level is the primary consumer, for example, or the producer, or the secondary consumer. And here we already see that it's titled Energy Losses in the Consumption of Animal Products According to the 10% Law. Maybe you've heard of it. It's a law in nature between energy conversion between trophic level is always goes along with roughly 90% energy loss. So 100 calories in chemical energy from plants are being given to primary consumers, so animals used in agriculture, for example. And here we see 90% of calories are being lost due to respiration, digestion, and excretion. So, yeah, a large part is being lost through body heat and metabolic products. And only 10%, 10 calories, are being used by the secondary consumer. So this is a law of nature. This is something that we cannot work around. And that's basically the main point that we want to make today. That's why using animals to convert nutrients is very, very inefficient.
For this mess. As you can see, when we eat animals, then we lose 90% of the plant-based calories that we produce on our agricultural land. When we so we need 10 times more plants to get the same amount of energy as when we eat the plants directly. So this etwas weiter weg. Okay, sorry. So it's much more effective to eat the plants directly than to put them through animals and lose 90% of the energy. Yeah, this would be the actual cycle that we produced as humans in our civilization. As you can see, the perfect natural cycle gets added chemical fertilizers, pesticides, imported plants, so they don't come from the same area where the animals live. There also we add chemical fertilizer and pesticides, and we take away the products from the animals, so they get taken out of this cycle. And also the animal agriculture industry produces a lot of emissions, like methane and other greenhouse gases. The groundwater gets polluted by emissions from the excretions, and all the antibiotics and pesticides, they get into rivers and eventually in the oceans. So it's a very ineffective industry that we build up that needs a lot of inputs and has a lot of destructive outputs.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we working. Yeah. So that's what we really want you to take away from this. Due to this intense energy loss that can never be avoided, it requires high inputs in the form of area or space being used up to grow feed, fertilizer, and so on, and then it produces an intense and very, very large amount of emissions, like manure and climate damaging emissions. And exactly, the suffering of animals. And so one thing, for example, Germany is importing 1/3 of its protein plants, according to the Ministry of Agriculture, which causes an unfathomable destruction in the global south, as we all know. And for example, the deforestation in the Amazon is more than 90% of it happens due to animal agriculture. So either growing of feed or
Grasslands.
Grasslands, grazing lands. Thank you. And then another problem that's very closely interconnected with climate change and animal agriculture is biodiversity loss. It's probably the thing that has the potential to cause the most problems in the future, and it's being overlooked at very much. It's everybody's on climate change is on everyone's mind, but biodiversity loss isn't. And animal agriculture is actually the main driver of biodiversity loss by far. And here you can see how these two planetary boundaries, both of them actually can make our planet uninhabitable, just if one is being broken. And they are in a positive feedback loop. So for example, here you can see the outputs from the circle we showed you before, how they affect the radiative forcing as well, which is fueling climate change, and then as well is fueling acidification, eutrophication, and in turn biodiversity loss.
Yes, as we can see here now, the metabolism of animals produces mostly methane through digestion, and the land use change, so deforestation by slash and burn practices, produce carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide comes from the artificial fertilizers and manure, of course. And on the other side, all those pesticides and the fertilizers, they make hostile environments for the wild animals. So those two things are interconnected. Animal agriculture affects both sides of the coin, and they affect each other. Yeah, here we have different studies about the. I don't know. Can you hear me? Yeah. Different studies about the portion of greenhouse gas emissions, human-made greenhouse gas emissions, and we can see the FAO stated in 2006 that 18% of the greenhouse gas emissions, human-made greenhouse gas emissions, are from animal agriculture, but they calculated the methane global warming potential over 100 years. And methane is a very short-lived greenhouse gas, and in the beginning it has a very high global warming potential of about 120, and only about over 100 years it has a global warming potential of about 30-35, and they calculate it down so animal agriculture is not so bad in the consumers' views. 2013 they corrected their numbers to 14.5%. I don't know why. Maybe they wanted to show it's less than the global mobility sector. There's also the study of Poor Nemecek from 2018 from the Oxford University. They calculated that 28% of human-made emissions are from the animal agriculture sector, and they also calculated methane over 100 years. So this is also not so concrete. We have here from Landwirtschaft Jetzt, from our friend Martin. He tried to calculate methane with the instantaneous global warming potential, and he comes to the conclusion that 31% of human-made greenhouse gas emissions are from animal agriculture. And here we have two other studies that come to the conclusion that there's a lot more portion of the greenhouse gas emissions, but they are quite flawed, so we don't need to talk a lot about them. Yeah.
May I ask?
Yes.
Do you have any numbers that focuses on the difference between animal agriculture when we eat the animals directly or the products of the animals? So if you say 31% of animal agriculture is responsible for climate change, I was wondering does it make a big difference if I'm vegetarian or vegan? That's more or less the question.
Of course, when you're vegetarian, you don't eat meat, so you need less animals reared for you. So,
but
but there's no differentiation between animal products and the meat consumption directly. It's the whole animal agriculture industry. Unfortunately, most vegetarians tend to supplement their former meat consumption with dairy products. So vegetarians have a lot of dairy consumption. So yeah, there's more animals involved in the end.
Thank you.
Especially because dairy comes from ruminants, which produce a lot of methane. Yeah, and one thing I really want to point out, because it's very important, is that FAO is steered and financed by all animal industries worldwide. They are trying to hide it on their web page, but it's there. You can look it up. If you look for the steering board and also the sponsoring, it's there. You can see the list, and yeah, it's quite something to see. It's amazing how they get away with it. And unfortunately, their number, the lowest number, stuck with everyone, and that's still the number that's being reproduced even by environmentalists, animal rights activists. But yeah, it's heavily flawed. Yeah. Of course, the other numbers are also heavily flawed. So, yeah, we would like to think that the Oxford study is the one that comes closest at the moment. There's still new science coming out every year. For example, I think 2 years ago there was a report in Nature that said that the emissions just from one fishing method, the ground net trawling, exactly, emits more CO2 than the whole civil aviation sector because of the disturbance of the sediments on the ocean floor, which acidifies the ocean and reduces the potential to suck up more carbon in the ocean. So that's, yeah.
And it also is the leading contributor of plastic in the ocean.
Exactly. Yes. There are so many environmental problems linked to animal exploitation. Yeah, but we will come to that also later a little bit. Yeah, so here we decided to focus on biodiversity a little bit more because it's so important and it's not being talked about. So we have some quotes from Matthias Glaubrecht. He's a professor for biodiversity and the director of the Center for Natural History in Hamburg. And he said in an interview in 2021, "Ignoring the loss of biodiversity could be mankind's biggest mistake. We are talking about the threat of losing several millions of animal species within a few decades. We might be able to reverse climate change, but we cannot reverse the extinction of species."
Yeah, the second quote from him is, in 20 or 30 years there will be no more large mammals in wild nature. Imagine, no more wild mammals. Large mammals like elephants and deer. Until the end of the 21st century, half of all animal and plant species might have disappeared from our planet. Right now, we have, when we look at the biomass of land mammals, we have 31% of this biomass is humans, and 60% of this biomass is animals reared by humans, and only 4% of this biomass is still wild and free. So if we look at this composition, we should fear that it's not much longer until an ecological breakdown.
Right, and with birds, for example, the ratio is 7-3, so 70% are farmed birds like chickens, ducks, and geese, for example, and only 30% of bird biomass in the world are still wild animals. And then there's one last quote from Mr. Glaubrecht, which is quite amazing and quite shocking. Biodiversity is a genetic database. Imagine the biodiversity of our planet as a hard drive we keep deleting more and more data from. maybe in the beginning just some memories get lost, but we also delete data which we have never had a look at, even whole program parts whose function and meaning we have no idea of, until the loss of data leads to a system crash and we do not have a backup.
And the problem is we never know which part of our hard drive we delete right now, because the biodiversity and the diversity of species is not yet investigated enough that we know, okay, this animal species is vital to our ecology.
All right, and now here we see the 9 planetary boundaries that were set up by the Stockholm Resilience Center. Sorry. So you see, 2 of them are already beyond zone of uncertainty. So that those are the biochemical flows, the phosphorus and nitrogen emissions that we talked about earlier, and the biosphere integrity. So the genetic and functional diversity, which is not even fully researched or understood. And then there's 2 more, which is climate change and land system change, so land use changes, basically the change from forest to grasslands or cities, whatever. So those numbers are from 2015. Especially climate change, since the new discoveries could be way higher, probably right between yellow and red. And yeah, like the title says, we are breaking our planetary boundaries, and animal agriculture is the leading cause for those boundaries that have already been exceeded by a very large margin. Anything you want to add? And so here we want to show you the rate of species extinction as an indicator of biodiversity loss. Here we see the number of extinctions per 1 million species per year. So there's a background rate of 0.1 to 1. So it's quite normal that species go extinct, new species emerge, but it's at a very, very low level. So 0.1 to 1 species out of 1 million go extinct naturally. The planetary boundary is estimated to be between 1 and 10. So you see there's still a lot of uncertainty. And then we have the current extinction rate, which is an unimaginable number. It's 100-fold to 1,000-fold of the planetary boundary. Yeah, I think this graphic speaks for itself. Yeah, there's not much we can add to that.
Yeah.
And then here we see how those planetary boundaries that are already been exceeded are connected to each other. So we see the 2 that are already quite strongly exceeded, the land use changes and the climate change. And then we have the eutrophication, so the phosphorus and nitrogen emissions and the loss of biodiversity that are very, very strongly broken already. And here we have the positive feedback loop again between climate change and loss of biodiversity. And the causes for the biodiversity are, so they're very interconnected. It's very hard to make out what exactly causes loss of biodiversity, but Stockholm Center for Resilience found out that it's the main cause is land use changes. So yeah, when we burn down forests, when we destroy habitat for wildlife and put fertilizer on it, which depletes we have it. We even have it here. Yeah. So acidifying gases, pesticides, fisheries, wildlife trade, which is very much interconnected with animal farming, because farmers kill wildlife that's threatening or taking up space of their farmed animals. And yeah, then we have the use of chemicals very much. But really, it's very important to when we want to understand what causes the loss of biodiversity, the extinction of species is the land use change is the most. That's the number one reason for biodiversity loss.
Yeah, and as we can see, all 4 planetary boundaries are affected by the animal agriculture industry. Those are the greenhouse gases from the metabolism of the animals and from the industrial fertilizers. It's the land use change for agricultural land. It's the biogeochemical flows that are disrupted by animal agriculture, because we take the nutrients out of the Amazon, put them on ships, ship them to the EU, and here the manure gets on the land. So there's not enough nutrients, and here we have too much nutrients, and in the end the soil is degraded. And yeah, with all the pesticides and fertilizers, we also accelerate the loss of biodiversity.
And then when we look at the eutrophication, it's an important or an interesting fact that the 5th mass extinction event in Earth history, the main cause for that was the eutrophication of water bodies. So, as we all know, we are in the 6th mass extinction event of our Earth history. Yeah, and the 5th, the main reason for that one was the phosphorus and nitrogen emissions. So here we want to come back to the land use change, since it's the main cause for biodiversity loss. Here we see the extinction rate again, and here we see the potentials. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted now.
It's land use change.
Yeah.
This column is before civilization, before industrialization. This is the planetary boundary, and this is the current state of things. So we see 53 square miles, square kilometers, billion square kilometers are changed, and this is much more than than we had before. And as we can see, only 3% of these land use changes are related to civilization, to concrete, to buildings, to streets, cities and roads. 21% of the land use change is for crop production, for direct human consumption of food. And 76% of this land use changes we made in the past is related to animal agriculture. And so it's by far the largest direct cause of habitat destruction. And with a shift to a plant-based food system, 58% of all human-made habitat uses could be reversed, because with direct vegetable and fruit consumption, we could free up a lot of land that we don't use anymore because of this better trophic level. Yeah, reforestation. When we switch to a plant-based food system, then we have a lot of space that we can reforest. And here we can see the pre-industrial level was 90% forest cover on land. And the planetary boundary estimated by the Stockholm Resilience Center says if we leave 75% of forested land, then we stay within the planetary boundaries. But the current value is 65%. We only have 65% of forest cover left on land. And when we switch to a plant-based food system, we would be able to regrow forests and to reforest up to 81% of forest cover. So that's a huge potential, and as you can see, we would be getting out of this threat of breaking the planetary boundary for land use change.
Thanks. So, the conclusion, we want to sum it all up again. The reason for the harmfulness of animal agriculture lies in the inefficiency of the conversion of plant-based calories and proteins into animal-based equivalents. This inefficiency requires high inputs of resources and generates high outputs of emissions. Both have a negative impact on material cycles. Water bodies, soils, and the atmosphere are destabilized, and consequently whole ecosystems.
Yeah, the second conclusion is calculating the contribution of animal industries to the climate crisis. Carbon opportunity costs are often neglected, and the global warming potential of methane not enough accounted for, as we said before in the FAO studies. And the study of the Oxford University from 2018 is considered to be the most comprehensible number of 28%, or roughly 1/3 of human-made emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, comes from animal agriculture.
And another problem, like we talked about, at least as serious as climate change, is the loss of biodiversity. The causes are multifaceted, but the use of animals is the deciding factor in most cases. Change in land use is the main factor, which is mainly driven by animal agriculture.
So, an immediate transition to an organic, plant-based food system and global reforestation can dramatically slow down climate change and put an end to the loss of biodiversity.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
At the end. Thank you. Any questions?
So, if there aren't any questions, and we still have a little bit of time left. Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, sorry.
I'm nearly vegetarian. That's not enough.
Well, to be honest, unfortunately not. Yeah, it's since we in the global north, we don't rely on dairy products, for example. Of course, we're not talking about countries in the global south like Afghanistan or Senegal, like we have heard talks before, where people rely on animal farming for their survival. We're talking about global north. Here we have still healthy soils, we have enough rainfall, we have a temperate climate, so we can produce plants, and we have potential to reforest and rewild nature. So, and like I said, the dairy industry is a very large contributor to the climate crisis, unfortunately, because of the methane emissions from ruminants. So it makes a lot of sense to reduce or eliminate dairy products as well from the diet, because we're simply not relying on it.
But don't get us wrong, going vegetarian is a very good first step. But we need to get rid of all those farmed animals, and as long as we consume dairy and eggs, we still rear animals. And for example, veal is a product coming out of the dairy industry. So we need to go fully plant-based. But it's a very good first step. Yeah. Just keep going.
So Gianluca, you had a question?
Yeah, no, I think we'll have to stop here because we're already running behind schedule.
We would like to do 4 short more slides.
Yeah. So because we spoke to Stephanie and she said we can have a few more extra minutes from her. Just really.
Geh weiter.
Just really quickly, I want to talk about some social injustices that are directly linked to animal agriculture. So that's one thing, for example, is the destruction of forests, the expulsion of indigenous people. Animals have always been used as a tool to colonize land. It's still happening in Brazil, for example. Then we have the exploitation of workers, very, very common here in Germany, for example, in the meat industry. And then one thing I want to briefly talk about, because it's so important, it's going to be in the news in the future very much, I think, and it's going to affect our life here as well. It has the potential to change the political landscape of Europe. So we are seeing right now a hunger crisis in Eastern Africa. It's not being talked about very much, but those headlines are from a few days ago, and it's the causes are like diverse and complex, but its main reasons are climate change. There has been a drought for more than 2 years. The war in Ukraine has led to skyrocketing food prices. Capitalism is driving speculation on food, which is an insane crime we need to talk about. And then there's the squandering of resources in our animal industries. For example, here in Germany, 60 to 70% of wheat produced is being fed to animals. Germany could be a major exporter of grain if we were to reduce the number of animals, but the industry is so powerful, it does not want to change. And that's absolutely unacceptable. We will be seeing a very, very intense hunger crisis. If we look back at 2010, the Arab Spring, for example, one of the main factors that caused it was a drought in Russia and an increase of the wheat prices by only 4% of the harvest was lost due to that drought. But the prices skyrocketed due to speculation. Not as much as now, as we're seeing because of the shortages coming from Ukraine and Russia. And those countries the Arab countries, African countries that are already under stress from the pandemic, climate change, and now are facing a very, very dire food crisis. And that has the potential to really cause massive conflict in the whole region, like we saw in 2010, spreading to other countries, leading to massive streams of refugees coming to Europe and radicalizing the whole political landscape here, which will make it so much harder to create change. Right? We saw the emergence of a very extreme right-wing party in Germany, for example. We are seeing it in other countries, and it's going to happen again if we don't act. And the animal industry has a very, very large part of it in it. Anything you want to add? No. So then we quickly want to talk about the plant-based treaty. That's why we're here. You can get free vegan hot dogs very soon.
They're setting up right now.
So, and the plant-based treaty is a roadmap for a transition towards a plant-based food system. It has all the necessary steps that we need to take to transition, and we need a fast transition, of course. We have to move away from animal production, from the wastage of resources, and there are 3 core principles. The first one is relinquish. We need to stop the problem from getting worse, so no more land use change, no more deforestation for expanding agriculture, no more slaughterhouses.
No new animal farms,
No new animal farms, yes.
The second principle is redirect. We need an active transition of the food system that could be attained by steering subsidies, for example, for people who want to stop animal agriculture and start organic food production. Taxes, public information campaigns. For example, if the government would tell the people that a plant-based food system is much more sustainable, we could accelerate this process. And we need to promote a transition away from animal-based food systems to plant-based systems.
All right. Last core principle is restore. We need to restore our Earth. We need to restore nature. We need to actively heal the problem, build resilience for more biodiverse ecosystems, and we need to mitigate climate change. So restoring key ecosystems and reforesting the Earth is a very, very crucial steps.
Good.
Yes. So you can endorse the plant-based treaty as an individual or as an organization. So maybe Scientist Rebellion or Extinction Rebellion is interested in doing that. And yeah, you're most welcome to come over to our food truck later and have delicious plant-based food. Thanks for your attention.
Eat plants, plant trees.